Imagine a young woman standing in the middle of a crowded marketplace, her heart racing, her palms sweaty, and her eyes heavy with both hope and fear. She had traveled from miles away, across oceans and borders, with nothing more than a suitcase, a few neatly folded dresses, and the unshakable belief that perhaps, just perhaps, love could be found in the most unexpected corners of the world. Her name was Amara, and she had signed up through a mail-order bride agency, hoping that somewhere out there, someone might see her not just for her skin color, not just for her struggles, but for the woman she truly was, brave, kind, and full of dreams that went far beyond the little village where she was born. The agency had paired her with a man in the city, someone who had requested a wife who would be loyal, supportive, and respectful of tradition. Amara had written letters, poured her heart into every word, praying that he would see her value. But when the day finally came, when she stood face to face with the man she believed could be her future, his eyes told her everything before his words could even sting. He looked at her with disdain, his lips curling as though her very presence offended him, and in a voice dripping with arrogance, he muttered that she wasn't what he had expected. In truth, what he meant was simple. She was too dark, too different, too unlike the image he had painted in his mind. And just like that, the man turned his back on her, leaving her humiliated in front of strangers, her heart cracking under the weight of rejection. For a moment, Amara thought her entire world had ended, that perhaps she was foolish to ever believe love could be found across borders. But destiny, as it often does, had something else in store for her, something greater, something she could never have imagined. Amara sat on the cold stone steps outside the agency building, her suitcase beside her and her pride shattered into 1,000 fragile pieces. The city was bustling, filled with lights, chatter, and people rushing past her without sparing a single glance, as if she were invisible, as if her pain belonged only to her and no one else could ever carry its weight. She tried to fight the tears threatening to escape her eyes, but they streamed down anyway, staining her cheeks as she remembered every letter she had written to the man who had just rejected her. She had told him about her love for music, about the lullabies her grandmother used to hum under the stars, about the way she could cook meals from scratch using only herbs and spices she'd grown herself. She had told him about her hopes of building a family, a home filled with laughter and warmth, and yet all he saw when she appeared in front of him was the shade of her skin, a detail she had never hidden, but one he had pretended to overlook, until it became an excuse to throw her away like she was nothing more than an application denied. With trembling hands, she reached into her bag and pulled out one of the letters she had kept, rereading the words she had once believed would lead her into a brighter future. But now, those words felt hollow, meaningless, like a cruel joke played on someone foolish enough to dream. People passing by whispered, some casting pitiful looks, others smirking as if they found her humiliation amusing. Amara hugged her suitcase, tighter, feeling the loneliness closing in on her chest, suffocating her with every passing second. She wondered how she would even return home. She had spent nearly everything to come here, believing it was her one chance at happiness. Yet, in that moment of despair, when she thought the universe had abandoned her completely, something remarkable happened. A tall man in worn-out boots and a rugged jacket paused not far from where she sat. His eyes, kind yet sharp, lingered on her as though he could see past her broken appearance and into the depths of her soul. Unlike the others, he didn't walk away, didn't whisper cruel things, didn't pretend she wasn't there. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across her as he asked in a steady, calm voice if she was all right. She looked up, startled, meeting the gaze of someone who didn't seem like the city men she had seen rushing by. There was something different about him, something raw and grounded, as though his life wasn't built on glittering lights or shallow appearances, but on something deeper. She could smell the faint scent of earth on his jacket, the kind of scent that told stories of fields, harvests, and long days under the sun. She had no idea that this was the moment her story would begin to change, that the man standing before her, an unexpected stranger, was a wealthy farmer whose world was about as far from the city's cruelty as heaven is from hell. Amara blinked, through the blur of her tears, unsure whether to answer this stranger or simply lower her head and retreat into silence. After all, hadn't kindness already betrayed her? Hadn't hope already mocked her? Yet there was something about the man's tone, something so unforced and genuine that made her lips tremble with words she hadn't planned to speak. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her cracked voice betrayed the lie. The man didn't push, didn't press her with questions. Instead, he crouched slightly to her level, his eyes steady and filled not with pity, but with a kind of quiet strength that told her he wasn't there to judge. "Sometimes," he said softly, "we say we're fine just so no one sees the truth. But I've learned in my life that the truth doesn't break us. It sets us free." His words, simple yet profound, stirred something in her, and for the first time since her rejection, she felt the tight knot of pain in her chest loosen, if only slightly. She studied him cautiously. His skin was tanned from the sun, his hands, rough and calloused, speaking of hard labor and honest work. There was dust on his boots, but his clothes, though plain, were clean and neat. He looked nothing like the man who had turned her away. In fact, he seemed the very opposite of everything she had just experienced. "Who are you?" she finally asked, her voice steadier now. He offered a small smile. "My name's Nathan. I work the land a few miles outside this city. Came here to sell some produce and take care of business at the market. But when I saw you sitting here, I couldn't just walk by." The name lingered in her mind. Nathan. It sounded strong, dependable, the kind of name that carried roots instead of shallow echoes. Amara hesitated before sharing her own. "Amara," she said, her voice low but clear. Nathan repeated it softly, as though tasting the syllables with respect, not mockery. "Amara, beautiful name." She almost laughed bitterly at the irony, because in her world, beauty had always been defined by standards that excluded her. Yet hearing it from him didn't feel like flattery. It felt like acknowledgement. He glanced at the suitcase beside her and then back at her face. "You look like someone who's been let down," he said carefully, not accusing, just observing. She nodded slightly, biting her lip, ashamed to admit the truth. "I came here for something that didn't turn out the way I hoped," she murmured. Nathan didn't ask for details, though his eyes hinted that he understood far more than he let on. Instead, he extended his hand toward her, rough yet steady. "If you don't have anywhere to go tonight, I have a truck parked nearby. I can take you somewhere safe, no expectations, no judgment, just safety. The world can be cruel, Amara, but sometimes you find pockets of kindness if you're willing to accept them." Her heart raced at the idea. How could she trust a stranger when trusting others had only led her to heartbreak? And yet, there was something different in his presence. She felt no threat, no hidden agenda, only a sincerity she couldn't quite explain. The night air grew colder, and the thought of sleeping on those stone steps, surrounded by strangers' stares and cruel whispers, terrified her more than the unknown. With a shaky breath, she placed her hand in his, the roughness of his palm, strangely comforting. Nathan helped her to her feet, lifted her suitcase with ease, and guided her gently through the crowd. As they walked, she caught snippets of people whispering again, but this time it wasn't about her humiliation. It was about curiosity. Who was this man helping a rejected bride with such care? What did he see in her that others had missed? When they reached his truck, An old but well-kept vehicle that smelled faintly of leather and hay. Nathan opened the door for her with the respect of someone who valued her presence. She climbed in, uncertain, her heart pounding with fear and hope mingling in equal measure. As he started the engine, the city lights blurred into the distance, replaced by open roads and the soft glow of moonlight. Amara watched through the window as the city that had chewed her up and spit her out grew smaller, while fields and wide spaces opened up before her eyes. Nathan drove in comfortable silence, not prying, not pushing, allowing her to breathe. She had no idea where this road would take her, but somewhere deep inside, for the first time in years, she felt a quiet whisper of something she had almost forgotten. Faith that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet. The ride stretched on as the hum of the engine and the rhythm of the tires against the dirt roads lulled Amara into a strange calm. She leaned her forehead against the cool glass window, watching the world transform before her eyes. The towering buildings and neon lights of the city faded away, replaced by vast fields that glowed silver under the moonlight. Rows of crops stretched as far as the eye could see, swaying gently in the night breeze, and in the distance, the silhouette of a large farmhouse stood tall, its windows warmly lit like lanterns of welcome. Nathan stole a glance at her from time to time, but he didn't press her with questions. Instead, he allowed the silence between them to grow comfortable, like soil ready to nurture trust. For Amara, each passing mile felt as though she was being pulled further away from the pain of rejection, though she still carried the sting deep within her chest. She wondered if she was being foolish to follow this man, but something inside told her it wasn't foolishness. It was courage. When the truck finally came to a stop in front of the farmhouse, Amara hesitated before stepping out. The air here was different, fresher, filled with the scent of earth, grass, and something sweet she couldn't quite identify. Nathan lifted her suitcase again with ease and gestured toward the porch. "This is home," he said simply, as if inviting her into more than just a house, but into a sanctuary. The farmhouse itself was sturdy and welcoming, its wooden frame polished by time but not broken. A swing swayed gently on the porch, and the sound of crickets filled the night with a kind of music Amara hadn't heard since childhood. She paused at the steps, suddenly overwhelmed, her heart thudding as memories of being turned away resurfaced. Could she really step inside someone else's home after being told she wasn't worthy of one? Nathan seemed to sense her hesitation. "No rush," he said softly. "You don't owe me anything. Just know that under this roof, you're safe." His words, plain and unpolished, struck her harder than any declaration of love could have in that moment, because they were rooted in something real. She followed him inside, where the air smelled faintly of pine wood and fresh bread. The interior was simple but warm, worn leather couches, a wooden dining table that looked like it had hosted years of laughter, and shelves lined with books and trinkets from a life well lived. Nathan showed her to a small guest room neatly prepared with clean sheets and a handmade quilt folded at the edge of the bed. She touched the quilt lightly, feeling the stitches, each one speaking of patience and care. For the first time since she had arrived in the city, she felt tears in her eyes, not from humiliation, but from gratitude. Later that night, as she lay under the quilt staring at the wooden beams of the ceiling, Amara thought about the strange turn her life had taken. Just hours ago, she had been discarded like she was nothing, and now she was here, in a stranger's home who treated her with more dignity than anyone else had in years. Her mind replayed the moment of rejection again, and again the sneer in the man's eyes, the cruel weight of his words, the shame she had felt burning into her skin. But now there was another image competing with that memory. The look in Nathan's eyes when he crouched down and asked if she was all right. It wasn't pity. It wasn't desire. It was recognition, as if he had seen something in her she had, forgotten to see in herself, worth. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was deeper than she had known in months. The next morning, sunlight poured through the small window, waking her with a gentle glow. She rose hesitantly, smoothing her dress before stepping out into the hallway. The smell of breakfast filled the air, eggs, bread, and something savory cooking on the stove. She found Nathan in the kitchen, humming softly as he worked, moving, with the ease of someone who had built a rhythm around his own hands. "Morning?" he greeted with a smile, sliding a plate toward her on the wooden table. "Hope you're hungry." Amara sat slowly, unsure of how to accept such kindness. She hadn't eaten since the day before, and her stomach ached with emptiness. But her pride wrestled with her gratitude. Nathan seemed to read her struggle again, speaking casually. "Out here, we share what we have. No debts, no keeping score. Eat." She took a bite, and warmth spread through her body. For a moment, she let herself relax, and as she did, she caught sight of the way Nathan watched her, not with scrutiny, but with quiet contentment, as if her presence itself was enough to shift the stillness of his life into something brighter. After breakfast, Nathan offered to show her around the farm. They stepped outside into the morning air, crisp and cool, with dew still clinging to the grass. The land stretched endlessly, rows of crops neatly tended, animals grazing peacefully, and a barn standing strong in the distance. Nathan spoke with pride about the soil, the seasons, the patience it took to make things grow. Amara listened, fascinated by the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about his work. He wasn't a man of extravagance, but his wealth was clear in the expanse of land, the healthy animals, and the quiet dignity with which he carried himself. This wasn't the kind of wealth that flaunted itself with gold watches or expensive cars. It was the kind that came from roots, from sweat, from building something with your own hands. As she walked beside him, breathing in the freshness of the air, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known she needed. It was in that moment she began to realize, perhaps what she had been searching for wasn't the glittering dream of a city husband who could provide her with riches, but the steady presence of someone who could see her, value her, and offer her a place where her soul could finally rest. Days began to flow into one another, and slowly Amara found herself adjusting to life on Nathan's farm. At first, she moved carefully, uncertain of her place, tiptoeing around as if she were a guest who might overstay her welcome. She offered to help with small tasks, washing dishes, sweeping the wooden floors, folding laundry, but Nathan never made her feel obligated. "This is your space too," he would remind her. "Do what feels right." That freedom, so simple yet so foreign to her, chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart. She began to wake up early, drawn by the sound of roosters and the scent of fresh earth, and found herself wandering outside, the dew dampening her shoes as the horizon blazed with morning colors. Nathan often joined her, carrying buckets of feed for the animals, and over time he started showing her the rhythm of his work. He taught her how to scatter grain for the chickens, how to lead the horses gently, and how to pull weeds without damaging the roots of the crops. His hands would guide hers sometimes, rough against soft, but always careful, always respectful. In those quiet lessons, Amara felt something blooming inside her, not just admiration for his knowledge, but gratitude for the patience with which he shared it. One afternoon, as they stood near the barn mending a broken fence, Nathan finally asked her the question she had been dreading. "What brought you here, Amara? Not just to this city, but to all of this." His eyes were steady, his tone gentle, giving her the choice to answer or remain silent. Amara swallowed hard, her throat tightening as the memories threatened to surface. She hadn't wanted to relive the humiliation, but something about Nathan's honesty made her trust him with her truth. So she told him. She spoke about signing up with the agency, about the letters she had written filled with hope, about the rejection she had faced simply for being herself. Her voice cracked when she admitted how small and unwanted she had felt, sitting on those cold steps in the city. Nathan listened without interruption, his jaw tightening with quiet anger at the cruelty she had endured. When she finished, she looked away, ashamed to meet his eyes, expecting him to see her as broken or desperate. But Nathan only placed a hand on the fence, his voice firm yet tender. Their blindness doesn't define your worth. You deserve better than someone who can't see the strength standing right in front of them. The words hit her like sunlight breaking through a storm. For so long, she had carried the burden of believing her value was measured by the approval of others, that rejection meant she was less. But here was a man who saw her pain and didn't see weakness. He saw resilience. Tears filled her eyes, not of sorrow, but of relief. And for the first time, she allowed herself to smile freely in his presence. Nathan returned that smile with one of his own, small but genuine, and in that shared silence, something unspoken passed between them, something that didn't need to be defined yet, but was deeply felt. In the days that followed, Amara became more involved in the farm's daily life. She discovered a joy in the work that surprised her, the rhythm of planting seeds, the satisfaction of seeing sprouts push through the soil, the laughter that escaped her lips when the goats chased one another in the pasture. She even began cooking meals using fresh vegetables from Nathan's garden, bringing flavors from her own childhood to his table. Nathan would sit across from her, savoring each bite, often remarking, "You've brought more life to this house than I've seen in years." And though he said it casually, Amara could hear the weight in his tone, the loneliness he had carried quietly, now replaced by the warmth of companionship. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Amara and Nathan sat on the porch swing together. The creak of the wood matched the gentle rhythm of the night, and for a while they said nothing, just watching the fireflies flicker across the fields. Finally, Nathan spoke, his voice thoughtful. People spend their whole lives chasing what looks good on paper, wealth, beauty, status. But the truth is, none of that lasts. What matters is what keeps you steady when the storms come. And I think you've got more steadiness in you than most I've ever known. Amara turned to look at him, her heart swelling with emotions she hadn't dared to feel since she boarded that plane with nothing but hope in her suitcase. She realized then that she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was healing. And in that healing, she was starting to feel something she thought had been lost forever. The possibility of love, not bought, not bargained, but freely given. Weeks rolled into months, and the rhythm of life on the farm became the rhythm of Amara's heart. She no longer felt like an outsider moving carefully through someone else's world. She belonged here, her laughter echoing in the barn, her hands planting seeds alongside Nathan's, her presence woven into every part of the land. Neighbors who visited began to notice, some whispering questions, others offering knowing smiles, as though they could see the bond between them, even before Amara and Nathan fully acknowledged it themselves. The sting of her rejection in the city had not completely disappeared. It still haunted her on quiet nights, but it no longer defined her. Each day, Nathan treated her with respect and kindness. Each glance from his steady eyes reminded her that she was not invisible, not unworthy, not too different to be loved. One evening, as the autumn air grew crisp and the harvest season approached, Nathan invited her to walk with him through the fields. The moon was high, casting silver, light across the rows of corn, and the air smelled of earth and promise. He stopped in the middle of the field, turning to face her with an expression she hadn't seen before. Vulnerable, uncertain, yet filled with determination. "Amara," he began, his voice lower than usual, I've lived a long time working. This land, building something I thought would be enough. I've had money in the bank, crops in the field, and neighbors who respect me. But for all of that, I've been alone. And then you came along, not because of fate written in some book, not because of chance letters or agencies, but because you were brave enough to step into the unknown. You may think I was the one who helped you, but truth is, you've saved me too. You've reminded me of what it means to live, not just work. You've filled this house with laughter and this land with joy. I don't see you as a guest anymore, Amara. I see you as the missing piece I didn't know I was waiting for. Her heart pounded as his words settled into her soul, breaking apart the last fragments of doubt she had clung to. She had been rejected because of her color, her background, her difference. And yet here was a man who saw all of it not as a burden, but as beauty. Tears glistened in her eyes as she stepped closer, her hands trembling slightly. "Nathan," she whispered, "I thought I came here searching for love, but I realize now I was searching for a home, a place where I could be seen. You've given me both. You've shown me I don't have to beg to be accepted. You've shown me that who I am is enough." Nathan's rough hands reached for hers, holding them as if they were fragile but precious. And in the silence between them, the night seemed to hold its breath. From that night forward, their bond deepened into something unshakable. Amara no longer feared the whispers of others, no longer doubted her worth. Together they built not just a life, but a partnership rooted in respect, laughter, and resilience. She learned the ways of the farm as if they were lessons written for her, and Nathan embraced the colors and flavors she brought into his world, blending their lives into a tapestry richer than either could have woven alone. In time, the farm flourished even more, not because of the land itself, but because it now carried the energy of love. Neighbors who once whispered began to speak with admiration, seeing how the millionaire farmer who had everything found completeness not in wealth, but in the woman he chose to stand beside him. Years later, Amara would sometimes sit on the porch swing, watching the fields glow under the same moon that had witnessed their first confessions, and she would smile. She would remember the cold, stone steps of the city, the cruel rejection that had nearly broken her, and she would marvel at how life had turned her pain into a path toward something greater. Nathan would join her, resting a hand over hers, and together they would sit in the quiet, knowing that love, real love, is never about appearances, color, or expectations. It is about seeing, truly seeing, the soul of another person and choosing them every day. Amara had once been a rejected bride, discarded because of her color. But in Nathan's eyes, she was perfect, not despite her difference, but because of it. And that truth, stronger than any insult, became the foundation of a life that no rejection could ever shatter again.